Crisis Power!
Sailor Moon, one of, if not the magical girl anime of at least my generation, and maybe just in general. And yes, I'm including the very weird dub by, I think, Viz Media, unless it was the other one that I can't say the name of this early in the video for fear of getting demonetized. And sure, this version did some questionable things, but we not only got a far superior opening song, but also some great memes out of it too. And outside of the memes, Sailor Moon is a show with a lot of lessons to teach, and it had a long run as well, starting all the way back in 1992 and having a movie come out as recently as 2023. And I think part of the reason for that is that the characters in the show are so memorable and lovable. From Usagi still not knowing how to use a computer 20 years later, to how hot-headed Rei can be, or that Makoto is both the most terrifying yet gentlest girl in the group. Even supporting characters like Tuxedo Mask have important roles and leave lasting impressions. So with all that said, you know what I'm doing here. I'm going to take the Sailor Scouts from Mercury to Jupiter and build them in D&D. Oh, and you can thank Mario on Patreon for commissioning this episode. If you want to commission your own team, you can do that on Patreon with the creator tier. Now let's get into these builds. Usagi Tsukino, or maybe Serena if you're going off the dub. She's a bit of an airhead, a bit of a crybaby, and more than a little clumsy. And while right now it might appear that she's a normal girl going through the chaotic period that is the early 90s, she is in fact not normal. Not even close, because she is in fact the reincarnation of the Princess of the Moon who died a long time ago during some war. And I'm pretty sure she stabbed herself with a big sword, but honestly my memory on this series is foggy at best, and binging a bunch of lore videos that have conflicting information only does me so much good. So forgive me if I get anything wrong and tell me in the comments. Anyways, we are skipping a lot of pre-show stuff with the Silver Millennium, the Black Moon Clan, and some weird time travel stuff, and instead going right to the beginning of the actual show, where Usagi, rushing to school after sleeping in, runs into a cat with a weird moon-shaped mark on its head. But before the call to adventure can even finish dialing Usagi's number, she rushes off to school to try to get to class on time. Which of course she fails. But the call from fate is not one you can ignore forever, as that same cat whose name is Luna catches up to Usagi at her house and forcefully transforms her into Sailor Moon. And thankfully she did, because it is just in time for Usagi to rush off to her friend's aid and cry so loud she shatters glass and stuns the monster long enough for her to one-hit KO it with her Moon Tiara boomerang attack. And that is just the start. Throughout the next few seasons, she gathers her allies, falls more and more for the mysterious Tuxedo Mask, and fights a bunch of new villains bent on stealing hearts, crystal mirrors, or whatever else they need. And it's during this time that Usagi, along with the other scouts, learn about their past lives as Guardians of the Moon, or for Usagi as her role as the Moon Princess, daughter of Queen Serenity. And soon after discovering this with an upgrade thanks to a magic crystal, Sailor Moon and the others defeat the same villain that once destroyed the moon, and despite everyone, including herself, being sacrificed to do so, everything kinda works out in the end, with the original events that set everything in motion to begin with being reset, causing the girls to return to Earth with their memories and abilities sealed. But don't worry, it really isn't all that long before the memories and abilities come back as a new threat appears. And I know it kinda seems like I'm blazing through this, but Sailor Moon is a very Monster of the Week style show for the most part. The episode starts, the current big bad talks about their plan, and sends a lackey to go do something to push said plan forward. Usagi and the other girls happen to get involved somehow, beat up the lackey, save the people to get involved, and go on with their lives. Rinse, wash, repeat with stronger villains, throw in some romantic drama, time travel, and no, they're not cousins, along with giving the girls slightly newer outfits and attacks every season or so. And boom, you've got a show that captured many fans in its web for over 30 years. But without going into a lot of detail on the individual episodes and various relationships, it can be really hard to actually give a detailed breakdown, again without just listing off plot points for each episode and so on. So, to clear things up, let's just say that this Usagi here at episode 1 of season 1 and this Usagi at episode 1 of season 2 are about the same when it comes to maturity. She's still clumsy and airheaded, but now she has some friends that can tease her about it, and she can kick some weird monsters' butt if she needs to. You know, as long as she's not overly distracted by Tuxedo Mask. So let's see what I can do with this for her background, and then we can talk about her various abilities so I can try and pin down her full build. Now, like I said at the start, Usagi is somewhat of a normal girl, so you would think maybe something like human with a student background, or at least something similar. But unless I'm wrong here, which I very well might be, Usagi did get her memories back of her time spent as the actual Princess of the Moon. So I think a custom background is in order, this time called the Moon Princess that comes with the Lucky Feet, since it seems like luck plays a pretty big part in a lot of their fights. And going off the fact that the princess is the daughter of Queen Serenity, who is also known as the Goddess of the Moon, I think rather than human, I'm going to make Usagi here into an Aasimar, specifically the one with heavenly wings, since a lot of her super or other powered up transformations have wings, and she can fly anyways, so it works. And if you're thinking the same thing I am for some of her future stuff, you'll hopefully agree with these stats, mostly focusing on charisma and dex, since miniskirts are not really the best option defensively. so she's got to dodge. And I would call most of what Usagi does, outside of a few kicks, spells. And knowing everything I do about her, she is not an int or wisdom based caster. So that said, she dumps intelligence, girl gets like a 30% on tests, and she's pretty dense. Oh, and here are the rest of her stats. Now looking at how combat usually goes in this show, it's kinda hard to pin stuff down exactly, but we do have a few things to go off of. Like her moon tiara that she hurls at her enemies, or healing escalation, which kind of either heals or purifies people. And Usagi has a ton more of these, all either moon or heart themed, and while I think it would be hard to get things to match up exactly, I'm going to do my best with my favorite way of doing these builds, the power of vibes. So going with that, let's look at how exactly Usagi got her powers in the first place. And this all started when Usagi ran into Luna, a strange talking cat with a moon-shaped mark on her forehead. And Luna was sent to the future in a capsule of some sort to find and help guide Usagi as Sailor Moon. And as we saw, Luna was also the one that gave Usagi the brooch to transform her in the first place, even if it's far from her full power. This is also when she cries loud enough to shatter glass and stun demons. So because this power technically comes from an outside source, and this will not only give her a good thing for her moon tiara, but also some healing, I think Usagi starts off as a celestial warlock, borrowing the power of the moon through her brooch. And I'm sure some of you saw this coming, but the cantrip Eldritch Blast works great for her moon tiara. Sure, it's not radiant damage, and if you really want that, you can just use Guiding Bolt. And Usagi's probably only going to go around 6 levels into this. That's probably around where I feel the ending of Season 1 is. This gives her Radiant Soul for not only when she realizes her past as the Princess of the Moon, but also for when she beats Queen Beryl and takes her first level in her second class, the Sorcerer. But before she hops over there, she does get a few invocations from being a warlock, like Pack of the Chain for Luna, and yeah, she doesn't really help out in combat too much, but she can scratch. And I know this one might seem a little bit out of place, but I also gave her Agonizing Blast to increase the damage of her moon tiara. Along with that, Armor of Shadows to help with her choice of armor, and lastly, Pack of the Blade and Thirsting Blade, since she does sometimes use a sword, or at least a different kind of weapon, and I needed 2 more anyway. This would also be around the same time as that reset I talked about happens, and all the girls have their powers and memories unlocked again by Luna and the other cat whose name I forget. And normally I have a little bit of a hard time going with Sorcerer because their theming and abilities are so specific, but there happens to be something that fits Usagi and Sailor Moon perfectly, letting her dip into her powers as the Moon Princess and the next queen with Lunar Sorcery. And this comes with a bunch of different abilities for different phases of the moon, but Usagi is really only going to focus on the crescent and full moon stuff since new moon is more dark. And this subclass not only gives her a bunch of good spells, depending if she goes with the full moon or crescent moon, but it also gives her Sacred Flame and lets her hit 2 different creatures with it if they're standing next to each other with Moonfire. And of course, being a sorcerer, Usagi gets Meta Magic, which I personally chose Quicken Spell because it's fun, but also Seeking Spell since her tiara is kind of heat-seeking. And while normally fights in this show are over in a few hits or just one good hit, that's not really how things work in D&D, so the level 6 feature Lunar Boons is going to help Usagi keep her sorcery points up as long as she's using spells from either the Abjuration and Divination schools for the full moon, or Illusion and Transmutation if she's in the crescent moon phase. She can also swap between phases as needed with the Waxing and Waning feature. And of course, she gets other features from Sorcerer, but honestly, I think her spells and feats are more important for matching her abilities. Well, really, I mean feat, because the only one she's taking is Warcaster, because Usagi tends to get roughed up, but still keep her magic going. But also, spells are important, like True Strike, which is good now, Protection from Good and Evil, Fly, Spirit Shroud, and one of my favorites, especially for Sailor Moon, Sickening Radiance. And lastly, her highest level spell that I think is even better for her tiara, and maybe a few other things. That being Crown of Stars, summoning 7 motes of light that she can fire off as a bonus action, each one doing 4d12 damage. And while it's a bit spread out, that is a total of 28d12 of damage from one spell. And lastly, I made sure she gets another transformation for either her cosmic or eternal form, or whatever form you want, with Tasha's otherworldly guise. For whenever she needs to get in there and start smacking people around with whatever weapon she has available, whether that's a sword, her Heart Moon Rod, or really anything else. This lets her attack twice with her Charisma modifier and ups her AC. So I know this one might seem a little sparse compared to the usual, but there's just way too much for me to actually go over here, and I feel like going too deep into the details would get kinda boring. Since again, I would just kinda be reading off entire episode summaries, so we're just gonna leave Usagi's build here. Usagi is still very much a clumsy crybaby, but she is a clumsy crybaby with the power of a goddess, and eventually, sometime in the next 1000-ish years, she does get her act together and become a proper queen, one strong enough to not only defend Earth, but the entire solar system.
Ow!
Oh, I'm sorry.
Why can't you keep your stupid shoes on your stupid feet, meatball head?
Why do you have to be where my shoe lands?
Serena, why can't you be more serious like other girls?
No way. I have to be natural. There's this guy who's in love with me, but only when I'm really myself.
Oh, really? Can't be too bright if he's in love with you. Or maybe he's just really dorky. I'd better leave. Don't cry. Here's your shoe. Sorry. Bye, Serena.
Okay, now there is a question I had for a long time watching Sailor Moon. Why is Usagi Sailor Moon? Why is she not Sailor Earth when she's on Earth? And moreover, where's the Guardian of Earth if it's not Usagi? Well, that's the thing. We see the Guardian of Earth a lot. He shows up pretty much every episode. The pep-talking, road-slinging Tuxedo Mask. But unlike a lot of shows that have the female character being the damsel in distress, the roles here are swapped a lot, with Tuxedo Mask being in danger or mind-controlled or something of the sort. And even when he's not, he's usually playing just a purely supportive role. Sure, he shows up and he protects Usagi from some attack with a rose, or he distracts the enemy, something. Then he gives Usagi a pep talk and just dips. There's also the Moonlight Knight, which is just the same thing but slightly different, but we're not going to worry about him. So, let's look at Tuxedo Mask real quick.
I am Tuxedo Mask. Sailor Moon, look into your heart and find the warrior within you.
He's a human with 3 levels in Bard for the College of Valor. My job here is done. And yeah, I know the joke is that he just shows up and doesn't do anything, but again, that's kind of the point. He's a supporting character. He's not going to be jumping in and throwing hands like the other girls are. So I think giving him a class that can show up, give a pep talk, maybe support a little bit with a few spells, and then leave before things get too hairy, fits him perfectly. Also, like, a lot of girls in this show are really into Tuxedo Mask, so having high charisma is kind of given, and Bard just fits. Especially with his flair for dramatic entrances and exits. Oh, and you can give him, like, the lucky feet, I guess.
Hey there, sailor ladies, going my way.
Tuxedo Mask, you're just in time.
Do you like this guy or what?
Look, he's saving all the other girls.
The Sailor Scouts have spoiled my plans again.
Okay, so Tuxedo Mask aside, while Usagi is the first sailor that we meet timeline-wise, she's actually not the first one to awaken their powers. That would be Sailor V. Someone who appeared in Tokyo pretty recently after working as a Sailor Scout in London and is the last member to join the party as a whole. But as much as I tried, I just couldn't put together a build that I was really happy with. But you know, there is someone else that's already done stuff with this series in the past, so just give me one sec. Hey, RJ, thanks for picking up.
Hey man, what's up? Of course, my fellow D&D tuber role-playing enthusiast. So, how long's it been? It's been quite a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, it feels like it's been a while since we talked or really did anything. I think it was last year during Extra Life?
Yeah, I guess it has been a while since the charity stream and then some other the collaboration stuff, and I do want to tag you in on a build I got coming up soon, but what can I do for you?
So I know you're a busy guy, but I was hoping I could tag you in to cover Sailor Venus since I can't really wrap my head around her for some reason, and I want to know how you would build her.
Sailor Venus, huh? Alright.
Awesome, sounds good. I'll get out of your hair and let you do your thing.
Well, let's get to work. So diving back into the transforming magical girls from anime, and diving back into Sailor Moon, because I haven't really done that outside of the main character from one of my own videos, it looks like Sailor Venus is pretty into the idea of becoming an idol. So with that in mind, I can't see any way of building her other than really going with a bard. But she has powers that tie into light magic, and then she has that love me chain thing. So in order to pull that off while still just going with a bard, luckily bards do get magical secrets, meaning that they can dive into every possible spell list, giving a lot of options there. But first, you gotta start off with going with human, grab the origin feat for magic initiate, so that way you can make sure that you get at least one attack spell pretty early on. So grab magic initiate to dive into the wizard spell list, and make sure you just use charisma for it so that you can grab lightning lure, and that can be your chain whip thing. Follow that up with something like dancing lights to really amplify that sort of idol nature. And since you have to grab a first level spell anyways, if you want to amp up that chain even further beyond lightning lure, grab witch bolt. The new witch bolt post 2024 is absolutely amazing. It requires an attack roll, and you let out a beam of light that you just latch onto an enemy. And even if you hit or miss, you can deal continuous damage to them repeatedly. Then just dive deep into Bard and go with probably the College of Glamour, because if you want to go idol, that's probably the way to go. And then once you can get magical secrets, grab every radiant damaging spell for your more light-based powers. And then just focus on light and beauty and everything else that makes up Sailor Venus. But that might have been a bit more diving in than you wanted me to, so I'll let you take over from here.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great build, and it's a hell of a lot more put together than whatever I would have made. But yeah, thanks for stopping by again, and you guys, make sure to go check out RJ over at D&D Builds. He does some really good character builds over there too, and does some stuff that I just can't cover. So go show him some love once you're done watching this video.
No problem, always happy to help, and if you ever need anything else, I'm here.
So with RJ back on his channel and the second of the 5 Sailor Scouts down, that means we can move on to the last 3. And again, just to avoid falling down the rabbit hole that is Monster of the Week and Seasonal Villains, we're going to be taking some broad strokes, starting with the first sailor to join Usagi, Sailor Mercury, or to her friends, Ami Mizuno.
Oh, you sure gave me a start, Kitty. What are you doing? Playing Lion of the Serengeti?
Now, Ami is kind of the exact opposite of Usagi. She's got good grades, is pretty shy, and as it turns out, is a bit of a gamer, smashing the high score on the Sailor V game when she first meets Usagi. And of course, shortly after meeting Usagi, who was already Sailor Moon at this point, her life takes a big turn. As during a trip to cram school the next day, Ami, along with a bunch of other students, are almost brainwashed by another Yoma. And when it doesn't work on Ami because she just didn't use the brainwashing disc, the monster decides to just, kill her. But as it turns out, Ami isn't just any normal human. Just like Usagi, she is the reincarnation of the Princess of Mercury, Sailor Mercury. And with her new powers over water and ice, her and Sailor Moon, who showed up as a doctor for some reason, managed to defeat the Yoma, and Sailor Mercury officially joins the team as the second Sailor Scout. Okay, so just humor me for 1 second because I really need to complain about this. Why does Mercury, the planet with a surface temperature of, you know, just around 800 degrees Fahrenheit, have water powers? And Mars, the planet that's on average sitting around a blistering negative 60 degrees, gets fire powers. I get that they're more based on the astrological thing with Mars being fiery and red, but it still just annoys me for some reason. That, and it also would have been really cool for Mercury to have like liquid metal powers, but whatever. Anyways, when it comes to her background and stuff, I was tempted to make Ami an Aasimar as well because she's also the reincarnation of a princess. But because as far as I can tell, the other princesses and their queens aren't considered gods, which I could be wrong on, tell me in the comments, I decided to just make her a human with the honor student background for the skilled and alert feats, since Ami is pretty vigilant. And given her focus more on strategy and making gadgets like her visor and pocket supercomputer, look, this was like the 80s in the show, a computer that small was not common, or I don't think technically possible, but whatever. With that in mind, Ami is going to focus mostly on her mental stats like intelligence and wisdom for her big ones, then con and dex again so she's not quite so vulnerable in her sailor outfit, and lastly charisma and strength. Also, I'm just going to say this now because it's inevitable. I'm going to get a few comments like this on every video, and I do. Mostly about stats just being wrong, but I'm using standard point array. I'm not just throwing numbers out exactly where I think they stand. That means I'm working with exactly these numbers. 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8, so sometimes things aren't going to be perfect. But moving on from that, like I said, Mercury has water and ice powers. At least the ice powers do make sense though, because the dark side of Mercury is super cold. And along with these powers, she has some gadgets to help the scouts from time to time. And water powers are, well, honestly, not the best. Usually in any sort of video game, or TTRPG in this case, they kinda get the shaft. But there are a few new options in this version of 5e, which we'll get to in just a minute. Now, Mercury here has some interesting attacks, like Bubble Spray, which you can really hardly call an attack because all it does is make fog and lower the surrounding temperature, the upgraded Bubble Spray Freeze, which actually does deal damage, freezing her enemies in blocks of ice, and a few more that really just boil down to surrounding her enemies with water to trap them, or bludgeoning them with powerful streams of water. And like I said, when it comes to offensive stuff, water is kinda hard to come by, with your best option being spells like Tidal Wave and Watery Sphere. But you can always flavor some other stuff as water, and with adding ice to the mix, she does have some better options, like Rhymes Binding Ice, Ice Storm, and even Cone of Cold. And on top of this, Sailor Mercury plays a bit more of a supportive role, at least compared to someone like Jupiter who can and will rush in and throw hands. And to get both water powers and some support stuff, I think the first step for Mercury is oddly enough going to be into the class of the Druid. And of course, Mercury doesn't turn to an animal, but thankfully one of the new subclasses, the Circle of the Sea, gives her Wrath of the Sea, so instead of turning into an animal with wild shape, she can instead use it to create an ocean spray around herself that damages enemies and pushes them away. And this same subclass gives her Rare Frost and Water Breathing on top of giving her swimming speed all the way at level 6, so if there's ever an underwater section for whatever reason, she's covered. And while the next feature from the Sea Druid isn't really something that fits Mercury, the spells from level 7 like Control Water and Ice Storm do. So Ami is going to hit a total level of 8 in Druid, getting 2 ASIs, 1 for Wisdom and 1 for Better Int to set up for her next class. And with her role as a strategist and the ability to make some high-tech stuff, along with the need for more spells and defensive things, Ami has a few options for her second class. Well, 2. She has 2 options because I kinda already upped her intelligence, meaning that either A, she's going to be an artificer, or W, she's going to be a wizard. And while I was tempted to make her into an artificer because of her computer, she really only has that and her visor, at least according to the wiki. So instead, I think the wizard is going to fit her a lot better, giving her spells that can not only cover both her visor and the computer, but also giving her some more water and ice stuff, like Cone of Cold for Aqua Rhapsody along with Hold Person and Hold Monster for freezing her enemies in place. And honestly, that's kind of it. But having 6 level spells does mean that she's going to be a level 11 wizard, so that means she gets 2 more ASIs and some free stuff from her subclass. Let's do feats first though, because she only takes the 1, just like Usagi, that being Elemental Adept for cold damage, followed by an ASI for her Wisdom and Int. Now there are a couple of options when it comes to the wizard subclass for Mercury, depending on how you want to play her. At first I was going to go with War Magic for her countering and protecting her allies, but again, something just didn't quite feel right. So instead I went with the more defensive cousin of War Magic, Abjuration, giving Mercury an arcane ward for protecting herself, and later on at level 6 she can send that ward over to her allies with Projected Ward. And lastly, something I feel that her visor should help with, Spellbreaker, giving Sailor Mercury counterspell and dispel magic for free, and letting her cast the latter one as a bonus action with her proficiency bonus added to the roll, meaning that Ami shouldn't have any trouble countering other casters and keeping her team more safe overall. Now Sailor Mercury might not be zapping or burning her enemies to a crisp, but she can definitely hold her own with her magic and can support her team with wards and spells as long as she doesn't try to cast them in too cramped of an area.
That poor guy.
Hope he doesn't get sick to his stomach.
He's perfectly fine.
She's right. I wouldn't be so worried. Thank you. If the cookies were completely burned through, there's little chance Mamoru would get food poisoning.
So hey, if you're still here and you're not subscribed, it would really help a ton if you change that. We're aiming for like at least 20k by the end of the year, and we're really not that far off. At the time of recording, we are sitting at just over 17,000, so if you like this stuff and you want to see more, subscribe and help appease the algorithm by liking the video, and tell me what your favorite magical girl show or manga is in the comments. Oh, and of course, if you really want to support the channel, my patrons get these character sheets for just $1, and you can commission your own team if you want. Now, back to the video.
I've had about enough of that monster! Mars! Power!
Rei Hino is a bit different from the others. While neither Usagi nor Ami really believed in anything supernatural before becoming scouts, Rei kinda dealt with that stuff on the daily, since while also being a student, Rei is a full-time shrine maiden, and it's not like she's stuck cleaning up the grounds. Rei is actively exercising spirits before becoming a Sailor Scout, and even during that time. We also know a bit more about Rei's upbringing, which was mostly by her grandfather, as her mother died when she was young, and her father is, well, too busy to be a father apparently. So Rei grew up hating her father, understandably, and living with her grandfather, which is where she would eventually develop her psychic powers as a shrine maiden. She's also a bit of a hothead with a temper that only gets more fiery as the show goes on. Moving on though, one day while working at the shrine, Rei happens to run into Usagi and Ami, and accidentally puts a paper seal on poor Usagi's head, putting a stop to whatever brain activity she has going on up there. This knocked Usagi flat out, and of course, hardly a day after meeting those two, Rei is captured by one of the baddies, Sailor Moon tries to save her, and Rei transforms into Sailor Mars. And like I complained about before, Mars is the dedicated pyromancer and actually mixes in her psychic powers as a shrine maiden with her sailor powers, with most of her attacks being fire mixed with paper talismans, or other symbols from her shrine. But before we get too deep into how Rei fights, which is mostly just blasting things with fire so they can reuse the same animation, let's look at her lineage and all that stuff. So same as with Ami and Usagi, I was tempted to make her an Asimar or maybe even like a Fire Genasi, but in the end I just made her a human again. If you want to make her a Fire Genasi or really anything else, it's fine, but she's gonna have plenty of fire as it is. So, Rei is a human with the Magic Initiate feat. I gave her that so she could have Firebolt and detect magic from it. And then I also gave her Shrine Maiden background Magic Initiate because free spells are free spells. Now, Rei's stats do look a lot like Ami's if you just swap around some Charisma and Intelligence. Since she's more focused on Charisma and Wisdom, she also has some good Dex and Con and Dump Strength. Again, she just really doesn't need it, and you might argue that her Charisma should be lower because of her short temper, but she is damn scary, and Intimidation is a Charisma skill. But let's move back to her fighting literally everything with fire. Sailor Mars is very direct. While Sailor Moon might try to heal or purify the enemies before actually dealing damage, and Mercury is more there for support and immobilizing, Mars does not mess around and goes straight for setting her enemies on fire. With attacks like Fire Soul Bird, Burning Mandala, and Flame Sniper where she creates a bow and arrow out of fire and shoots that at her enemies. And I'm gonna be honest, none of these were really all that hard to get. But rather than just focusing purely on her fire stuff, because, let's face it, making a purely fire-based caster really isn't that hard, just kinda boring. So instead of starting with the obvious, Rei is going to start with her job not as a Sailor Scout, but as a Shrine Maiden. And if you saw my Touhou video, go watch that by the way, I want to do more Touhou, so go watch it please. But if you already have seen it, you'll know that I made Rei, the Shrine Maiden for the Hakurei Shrine, into a Cleric. And the plan is the same here. Rei uses paper seals and can commune with spirits via her powers, even if she's not really as broken as Remu. So with a quick start in Cleric, she gets some basic features like spellcasting and Channel Divinity, but honestly I don't think she's going to be very strong as just a Shrine Maiden. Sure, she can slap seals on stuff, but her powers overall don't really skyrocket until she becomes a Sailor Scout. And I'm going to say that's right around level 3, where she is going to unlock her powers and pick the Domain of Light. Because Wizards of the Coast is too cowardly to make a pure fire domain, this is our best option because Forged Cleric just really doesn't fit. But the Light Domain does give Warding Flare, letting Rei flashbang someone who tries to attack her, and a few good fire spells like Burning Hands for Fire Soul and Scorching Ray for the bird version, along with just Fireball at level 5. But before she dives too deep into Cleric, she's going to stop at level 6 for now, and instead move over to something else for a bit more direct firepower with the Pyromancy sort... Wait, ow. Okay, never mind. I just realized as of writing this that the Pyromancy subclass is not official, so we're gonna pivot to the Draconic Sorcerer. This unfortunately does mean that she won't have resistance to fire because that doesn't come until level 6 for Draconic Sorcerer, but she will have a bit more HP and AC thanks to Draconic Resilience. And while this will give her a few more spells, what Rei is really here for are a few meta magic options, primarily Twin Spell and Empowered Spell, both letting her hit multiple targets with a single targeting spell, and making her saving throw spells that much harder to resist. And after getting one more ASI for her Wisdom and Dex, Rei is going to grab one more spell to cover her Burning Mandala. I hope I'm saying that right. Either way, she is covering that with Melf's Minute Meteors. It is a bunch of small fireballs that she can throw either all at once or in batches, so it fits. Actually, I'm pretty sure it's only in batches, but whatever. And after that, Rei is going to jump right back over to Cleric, where she stays. This is also the portion of the video where I disrespect spell lists by ignoring her list restriction because I want more fire spells, and I don't really care if the spell list says she doesn't get them. At least when I'm doing single element casters like this. And if you happen to respect spell lists more than I do, just don't do it. Her build still works perfectly fine without it, I just want a few more fire spells like Delayed Blast Fireball and Firestorm, 2 7th level spells. This also gives her improved Blessed Strikes for giving temporary hit points whenever she uses a cantrip, and 2 more feats. And of course there's the obvious Elemental Adept Fire, because if you're playing a Fire Mage, why not? And the other one is going to be Warcaster for keeping up any concentration spells. And with that, I think we have all of Rei's attacks, as long as you aren't counting like the team attacks, because you can't really do those. But yeah, Rei's build is honestly not that weird. Sure, a lot of her powers come from her Cleric levels, but she also has plenty of firepower and should be dishing out lots of damage, given that the Sailor Scouts don't go picking a fight with a red dragon.
No way. Someone as young and pretty as this has to live a long life. She owes it to the world.
Who are you talking about, Sailor Moon?
Me, of course. I'm easily the prettiest of the 3.
Ah, and what's your best feature?
My face. Just check out this beautiful nose.
I've seen gorillas at the zoo that are prettier than you are.
Oh, how dare you!
Okay, we are kind of speeding through these, and there are 2 reasons for that. First, my throat is dying, so I want to get this done as quickly as possible before I go hoarse. I have other stuff to record, but also because we only have 1 scout left. The Lightning Queen and second last sailor to join, Sailor Jupiter.
Who is it?
Hey, Andrew, it's Lita! Ready to cook up a storm?
Makoto Kino, our lightning-slinging, gardening tomboy who, despite everyone saying she's super tall in the show, the girl is only 5'6", which, okay, given, a 14 to 16-year-old Japanese girl being that tall is kinda tall, especially considering the average height for an adult man in Japan is only 5'7". But despite her intimidating presence, she likes cooking, gardening, and of course, karate, at one point beating up an entire group of thugs who are harassing the other girls. And as per usual at this point, it is not long after meeting up with Usagi and the others that Makoto is dragged into the life of a Sailor Scout as she helps Sailor Moon and the others defeat an arcade machine man. Look, villain designs were weird back in the 90s, or just in general, look at any of the designs for villains in My Hero. They're just weird. But Makoto fits right in with the rest of the scouts, and as the show goes on, probably becomes one of the single heaviest hitters when it comes to pure damage output. So let's have a little bit of fun with that at the end of this part. Also, because I know someone is going to say it, I know Sailor Moon is stronger, this is pure damage output, not like power output, okay? Good. Anyways, of course, Makoto is going to be a human. Make her something else if you want to, not a big deal. The important thing here, though, are her feats. Tavern Brawler from being a human, and the tough feat from her background as a tomboy. Because yeah, Makoto is a tough cookie and knows how to throw down. And thankfully, her stats are also super easy, with a big focus on strength, dex, and wisdom. After all, without her sailor powers, she was still strong enough to lift up this arcade man over her head and throw him. That is a full-grown arcade machine right there. Not easy. I also decided to dump Makoto's int here because she sure as hell doesn't dump Khan, and it was between that and Charisma, so yeah, she can join Usagi at the study table later. But moving on from there, let's look at how Jupiter fights, because unlike the others, she doesn't just throw elemental attacks. No. Jupiter gets in there and gets her hands dirty, putting her karate training to good use alongside with her lightning powers. Like her basic attack Supreme Thunder, its upgrade version Supreme Thunder Dragon, and a few more that we'll go over as we cover her martial arts and stuff. Because while not everyone who punches is a monk, when you specifically practice martial arts, I think that qualifies you to be a monk. Especially when Makoto is doing stuff like this before even getting any sailor powers.
This chick thinks she's stronger than we are, don't you, babe?
Don't call me babe!
Hello!
Take that! Now apologize and then move your sorry carcass!
So yeah, Makoto is starting off as a monk, getting martial arts and unarmored defense, but of course she doesn't go too long before she gets her sailor uniform and is given control over lightning. And for that, she's actually gonna stay as a monk, at least for now. Going with the very much improved Warrior of the Elements subclass, giving her elemental attunement so she can punch lightning and increase the range of her punches by 10 feet. And you could count this as her Supreme Thunder if you want to, but you don't have to since we're going to be getting something else to cover that in a bit. But that is going to be after she gets the Strike of the Storm Giant feat for an extra 1d6 lightning damage on her punches. Well, just one punch. But outside of just punches, this monk also gives Makoto something at level 6, with her third non-attack where she throws a ball or maybe disc of lightning at her enemies before, of course, it explodes. Because level 6 of Monk gives Makoto Elemental Burst, letting her choose some poor soul within 120 feet and blasting them with 3d8 and later 3d10 lightning damage. Plus, this will help her save on some resources later on after she jumps over to her second class. But we're not quite there yet. Makoto is going to finish off her monk levels first with a +2 in strength, heightened focus for more punches, and stride of the elements. Usually that's something I avoid since a lot of the characters that I give this subclass can't fly, but Jupiter can, so she gets to fly with this. Plus at level 11, she is running 50 feet and her elemental burst is hitting for 3d10, or she can make a total of 5 punches at 1d10 plus her strength on each of them. Plus, like I said, Jupiter is probably going to be the hardest hitting of the Sailor Scouts, and I really want to make sure her damage isn't lacking. But beyond that, let's look at her second class, where her damage is really going to jump up after she moves over to the Cleric, and not for the same reasons as Rei. In this case, Makoto is here purely for bigger booms, like her Super Supreme Thunder, or the oddly named Jupiter Oak Evolution. And to get those bigger booms, she is going to go with the Tempest Domain, which comes with one of the best channeling divinities in the game, Destructive Wrath, maxing out the damage on anything she does that deals lightning or thunder damage, including her new spells like Lightning Bolt. See, I told you we were going to get another Supreme Thunder, but she also gets Called Lightning for her Oak Evolution, and as one more way to get her Sparkling Wind Pressure, Storm Sphere, but that one might be pushing it a little bit since Storm Sphere is mostly wind. Oh, and Makoto is going to go a full 8 levels into Cleric, meaning that she gets features like Thunderous Strike for pushing people away, but also another 2 ASIs, one for Elemental Adept Lightning for obvious reasons, and the other one is going to be an ASI for her Strength and Wisdom, maxing out her muscles for maximum punches. Now, depending on your DM, if they're cool, they will let you take Gift of the Chromatic Dragon and put that on Makoto's fists. And while I would, I can't know that everyone will. But if you want, go ahead and swap that out for Strike of the Storm Giant, and you'll get an extra 1d4 on every attack instead of just 1d6 on one attack. Because like I said, Makoto is probably going to be the one hitting the hardest here. So let's take a look at that now. First, without any Gift of the Chromatic Dragon, she gets 3d10 as an action from Elemental Burst, and just for fun, she is going to max it out for 30 damage, plus Flurry of Blows for 3 punches at 1d10 plus 5 each, and then 1d6 from Strike of the Storm Giant. Add on to that 1d8 from Blessed Strikes, and that is going to be 3d10 plus 1d6 plus 1d8 plus 45 for around 72 damage. And that's not bad at all. But if we replace that Elemental Burst with a maxed out Lightning Bolt, which is 8d6 or 48 damage plus the punches, that turns it into 3d10 plus 1d6 plus 1d8 plus 63 or 90 damage in one turn. And lastly, by changing out Strike of the Storm Giant for Gift of the Chromatic Dragon, that changes 1d6 into 3d4 and ups the total to 95 damage. It's not a ton, but more damage is more damage. And with support from her team, like maybe Mercury or someone else hasting her, Jupiter could do even more damage. Plus, unlike a lot of my builds that just blitz the enemy in one turn for a bunch of damage, Jupiter can do this 3 times. So if we're counting that, her damage output is around 285. So there aren't really a lot of enemies that can stand to Makoto for too long. Makoto is a beast, defending her friends, beating up her enemies, and quite literally sacrificing herself for them at certain points. But don't let her height and intimidating presence scare you, unless maybe you're one of the enemies. Then you should probably be scared.
What about you, Lita?
What about me?
I suppose you're gonna side with your cheater friend too.
Take that!
Wow, you have a strong! But Lita, you shouldn't use violence. Huh?
Okay, that is that. Thank you again to RJ for popping in and helping with Sailor Venus. Go check out his channel. I will link it somewhere. He does awesome single character builds that I really can't do in this channel, and they're a lot more in-depth than mine because he's only doing one character. And of course, thank you to my testers and patrons, especially Mario who commissioned this team. And if you want to fast track your own team to the front of the pack, you can do that on Patreon for just 20 bucks. And I think that is going to do it. I'm going to get going before my voice fully dies. I will see you all next time, and as always, have a wonderful day.